Hey guys, this is Rick coming at you with Weed to No Basis, the podcast for all things cannabis business related. Are you an entrepreneur? Have something you wanted to create, something you wanted to bring to life in the cannabis industry? Maybe you've always wanted to partake in one of the biggest industries in modern day history. This is the podcast to listen to. Hey guys, this is Rick coming at you with Weed to No Basis. So if you're listening to this, then you are on a Weed to No Basis. So in the last podcast, and Birds in the Weeds, we talked a little bit, we touched about having that critical or sometimes different conversation with your children. Or if you're the child, having it with your parents. And of course, we talked about in the legal realm of cannabis, okay? Not in the illegal realm, just want to be clear. And this podcast, guys, is about ending the stigma and why using that actually isn't ending the stigma. So I touched on that on the last episode, and I promised you that when we got to the next episode, I'm going to prove to you and leave you a compelling message of stop using hashtag end the stigma. So here's where that comes from. And it might sound counterintuitive. You might be thinking, I'm going to turn this off right now because this guy is FOS. But I'm going to tell you guys why you need to listen. You see, because there's already an army of people. There's already an army of cannapreneurs, of cannabis connoisseurs. There's people who are marching on Washington. They're up in Austin. They're in Iowa. They're in Nebraska. They're in Sacramento. And they're beating the drum of legalization. They're fighting the good fight. Those people are holding up, guys, and we're all on the same team. Just want to be clear. When I say those people, we're all on the same team. Just like a baseball team needs a catcher, pitcher, or outfield, we all have a position. I'm just coming from the viewpoint of the cannabis startup entrepreneur and why using those cliche titles is damaging you. You see, because when those folks, part of our team, are on Capitol Hill and doing those things and holding up the signs, yes, they're fighting to end the stigma. But here's why it doesn't work for us entrepreneurs. Because most people, a lot of people are looking for alternatives. Okay, so if you're a plant-touching entrepreneur, maybe you have a CBD product, or you're in a recreational legal state and you have a new strain, there are people who are looking for relief. They're looking for wellness. Maybe these are folks who have been on some sort of prescription regimen like I was. Maybe they're on opioids. Whatever that is, when we introduce who we are to them as somebody who can help them with a tagline like end the stigma or free the weed or legalize now, we unentrepreneur ourselves. Does that make sense? When we start using go to war slogans, guys, we scare people. Where people previously weren't scared. You see, because generally speaking, guys, and I'm going to tell you the reason why. I'm going to give you a real story of why this is true. Generally speaking, people don't know that there's a battle. They're in their own battle. They don't care about free the weed. They don't care about end the stigma. They don't care about these hashtag slogans that our patriots on Capitol Hill are saying. They just care about relief. Do you feel me? They just care about relief. And as a responsible and ethical entrepreneur, stop using those hashtags because all you do is place fear where fear did not exist before. So I turned to CBD products. I turned to the cannabis world when I needed relief. I didn't know that there was a battle. I didn't know that there was free the weed and there was things going on in Congress. I didn't know. All I knew was that I needed help. True story, guys. That's all I knew. I knew that what I was consuming prescribed to me, guys, and I'm not anti-Western medicine, to be clear. I'm not. I didn't know there was an alternative until the day I knew about it. But I sure didn't find out about it because of the battles on Capitol Hill. I didn't find out about it because of a tweet that said end the stigma. I found out about it because somebody cared enough to introduce me to a CBD product and it changed my life. But they didn't do it with these hashtags. They didn't do it with, you're a revolutionary, Rick. We're join the fight. They did it because they cared. And if you're an entrepreneur, a startup entrepreneur in the cannabis industry today, stop using those hashtags. Don't use them. Stop using words like user. We're consumers. Stop. Guys, the truth about end the stigma starts with you. It starts with you and your choice of words. It starts with you being more intelligent about how you're expressing how this plant helps people. It starts with you and it ends with you. I'm not saying we should eradicate the hashtag end the stigma or those go to war hashtags like that. All I'm saying is that if you're a responsible and ethical cannabis startup entrepreneur, that is no way to begin the launch of your business. It's not. The people who need your help, the people who right now, as I'm talking to you, are on their knees praying for your solution, they don't want to hear about your fight. They don't care about your damn fight. They don't. They just want to know that you care about their fight. Help them. Stop using these crazy hashtags if you're a cannabis startup entrepreneur. Let our brothers and sisters who are marching on the capitals use those hashtags and use them to win the war. That's not our war as a startup cannabis entrepreneur. It's not. So let me tell you guys, before I decided to record this episode about these go-to-war hashtags, I didn't know I felt this strongly about it. So let me share with you how this emerged. And as I share this with you guys, I want you to think about things you've heard in the industry and how you can use what you've heard as fuel to further your mission. So I speak at conferences, cannabis conferences, and actually non-cannabis conferences about the business of cannabis. We talk about, what this podcast is about, the cannabis startup entrepreneur. And I spoke at a conference, and it was a full house, and it's not bragging if it's true. Just want to be clear. So you're going to hear me say things, guys, and I know there's some folks going to say, oh, he likes it. He sounds a little arrogant, but it's not bragging if it's true. It was a full house. And afterwards, when I came off stage, talked to a bunch of people, but I had to go off stage and go through like a back room, and I sat down and I had a sandwich. I kid you not, it was the green room, so I was eating a sandwich, and a camera crew walked in, and we started talking, and they were filming something else, another part of the conference, and they started asking me questions. So what's your topic? And I said, well, I talk about the business of cannabis, really for the nascent or early stage or startup cannabis entrepreneur. And they got a little inquisitive. Now, the cameras were not rolling. We were just having a conversation. They were eating a sandwich too. And one of the fellas started asking questions. I think he was the interviewer. In fact, I'm pretty sure he was. I would venture to say he was, because he had pretty good questions. But he actually asked me that. He said, so Rick, he said, we're here at this conference and there's a lot of entrepreneurs here. There's a lot of folks in the hemp industry and they're in the marijuana side and this side. They're doing a lot of great things, glass and all the counterculture, all the things. And he said, and I see people wearing t-shirts that say end the stigma and things like that. And he says, how does that work? He goes, how does that hashtag end the stigma, how is that working? How does that work for let's just say the person who's getting a business started in cannabis? And folks, the truth is I hadn't really thought about it in that frame. I hadn't, honestly. And when he asked me, I said, it doesn't. That's where this whole podcast, this episode today comes from, because when he asked me that, I realized that it doesn't. I want you to think about the movie Braveheart. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. But what it's really about is William Wallace way back in the 1500s, give or take, Scottish, when it's a guy movie, okay, just to be clear, it's a guy movie. There's a lot of, they have spears and swords and they ride horses and they go attack the other villagers and stuff like that. But the movie is about freedom, it's about independence, it's about moving, it's about momentum forward. That's really what it's about. Yes, there's a hero, but here's where I'm going with it. Here's why these hashtags don't work if you're a cannabis startup entrepreneur, why you should avoid them. You see, when William Wallace in the movie, when he's rallying his troops, and they're all a bunch of big, burly, like Viking-looking people, they're beating their swords on their shields, and they're making noise, and then they get the blue paint out, and they paint their faces blue, and they're screaming freedom and freedom, and here's what they're really screaming. They're really screaming hashtags. They're screaming, freedom for Scotland, end the stigma. You see, those hashtags have a place. But back in the village where people need help, which is essentially where we're at, see, as a startup cannabis entrepreneur, guys, our jobs are to help those who need the help. Not to beat our swords on the shield and to paint our faces blue and use these hashtags. And when he mentioned that to me, when this cameraman asked me, how does that work for the cannabis startup entrepreneur, I realized it doesn't. We're not at war. The warriors are at war. The ones who are marching on Capitol Hill are at war. Guys, whether you like it or not, if you're in the startup world and you have a product or some service that's helping the everyday consumer, then you got to stop using those hashtags because it scares people. It tells them that there's potential fear where there shouldn't be fear. There is somebody, guys, like I said, they're on their knees right at this moment praying for your service, for your solution, for what you have. If you approach them with the beating the drum, paint the blue face, scratch this, yell out, end the stigma, you're going to lose. Take that to the bank. This may be something you've never heard before, guys, and the truth is that's why we exist here at Weed to Know Basis, because we're giving you perspectives that nobody else is going to give you. Why end the stigma actually isn't is because those hashtags are for the people who are fighting the good battle on behalf of us. If you're a startup cannabis entrepreneur, guys, stop using those things. Go take care of people. Go do the thing that you are destined to do. So as we wrap this up, and you listening, you folks out there, the soon-to-be cannabis startup entrepreneur, or the person who is new to the industry, or even you've been in for a while, and you have a hankering to use those cool hashtags or wear a t-shirt, I'm just going to compel you to rethink it. You see, guys, those hashtags work for the warriors, the ones who are trying to change policy, change law. If your job as a cannabis startup entrepreneur is to help people who are needing the help, don't scare them. Don't scare them. Remove those hashtags from your vernacular. Remove them from your Twitter feed. Remove them from your Facebook Messenger. Remove them from these things and just go help people. Guys, that's all I got for today. It was a straight to the point, guys, just a punch in the gut talk today of stop using the shit that's not going to serve the greater good. Remember, tune in to the next episode, Weed to Know Basis. If you're listening to this, if you are listening to this today, then you have a Weed to Know Basis. See you guys soon. Peace.